I'm going to show you how to clean and maintain your carbon steel pans by doing everything they tell you not to do. I've got my wok here, but these techniques will work pretty much the same on all carbon steel and most cast iron cookware. We made some Thai drunken noodles the night before, and I didn't have time to clean the wok, so it's been sitting there out all night. There's plenty of oil and sauce residue, as well as pieces of noodles, veggies, meat that's all dried out and stuck to the pan, so it definitely needs a thorough cleaning, which will be no problem. The most important part in keeping your carbon steel fresh and smooth is to remove any excess oil left in the pan. If it hasn't been incorporated into the pan seasoning, that oil's got to go. Otherwise, you'll end up with kind of a gunky pan with rough and splotchy seasoning. To do this, we'll just use some dish soap. Don't be afraid to use soap. It's not going to ruin your seasoning or hurt your pan. So adding some warm water, I'll try to remove most of the oil and cooked on particles just with a nylon bristle kitchen brush. On a particularly dirty pan, there's usually some bits and pieces that will need a more aggressive approach, but I'll remove what I can just with this brush. They make these chainmail cast iron scrubbers, but I like to go right to the big guns, which is the steel wool scrubbing pad. I find steel wool does a much better job and is much faster at working off stubborn bits of burned on food, but more importantly, oil that has only partially polymerized and hasn't really become part of the pan seasoning. This stuff is the number one cause of uneven seasoning with rough, visible layers, and it's really important to remove this oil before cooking in the pan again. I'll go over the pan with the steel wool while applying light to medium pressure. You don't want to press too hard because you can scrape off some fresh seasoning, but even if you do, it's not an issue. You can always come back and fix that later. I'm trying to run my hand over the surface of the pan to make sure it's clean and smooth, so if I feel a rough spot, I'll just come back with the wool and give a little more attention to that spot. Once I'm satisfied, I can rinse off any soap and give it one last feel. Looks like I did miss a little spot, so I'll come back and hit it with the wool again. A final rinse, and it's ready to thoroughly dry off. At this point, the wok is clean and ready to be put away, but I'll show you how to do a quick maintenance seasoning if the steel is looking particularly dried out or raw. And I'll also do this right before cooking as the pan is preheating. Grapeseed oil is my favorite oil for cooking in cast iron or carbon steel, but for seasoning, vegetable shortening is the easiest to use and creates a really nice thin layer of seasoning. A quick trick for cooking with a wok is to remove the cap on your gas range to provide a flame that's closer to an actual wok burner, where the flame is just going straight up to the center. Just be careful as you'll need to light it manually, as the automatic lighter won't work when you take the cap off. And also be careful because that flame can get pretty high, so make sure to turn it down when the wok isn't on there. When the pan gets to around 300, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when I can put a very light coat of shortening on the pan with a towel, just making sure to cover the entire surface evenly. Now the goal is to get the oil just past its smoke point, which varies by oil, but is usually somewhere between 400 to 450 degrees. And once it starts to smoke, then I'll know I can just wipe off the remaining oil with a clean part of the towel. And I'm going to go over the whole pan very thoroughly with that towel, making sure I get all the oil off. And I'll repeat this whole process maybe 2 times if I think it needs a little bit extra seasoning on there. The important thing is to make sure that your towel comes off clean after wiping the pan down. You don't want to see any oil or residue on your towel, and that'll just assure that all the oil has soaked into the pan or been removed. Note that I have my exhaust fan off here just for recording purposes, but you should always be running that fan if you're cooking or just have the burner on. And this is how you get cast iron and carbon steel pans that are perfectly smooth to the touch and nice and shiny, but aren't oily or greasy or otherwise rough with excess seasoning.